What if you could be silly, have fun, and laugh while you're teaching your child to read? Today's guest is going to tell us exactly how to do that. She's got some amazing parenting hacks, tips, and tricks, and she also has an amazing methodology that she developed as a part of teaching her own child how to read. Stefanie Hohl has been teaching children to read for years. She holds an advanced degree in both children's literature and early childhood education, and she has experience running preschool, homeschool, and local storytime programs. She developed the ABC See, Hear, Do Learn to Read method to help make early reading fun and easy for kids and their parents. She lives in Pittsburgh with her husband, their 5 children, 2 very silly dogs, and 2 cuddly cats. She got a house full, but she also has amazing ideas for us today. I can't wait for you to hear more from Stefanie. Please welcome Stefanie Hohl to the show. Hi, it's Mary Jo Tinlin from Teaching Your Toddler. Today we have Stefanie Hohl as our guest. I can't wait to talk to her. Stefanie, welcome to the Teaching Your Toddler show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show. My name's Stefanie Hohl. I am the owner of ABC See, Hear, Do. It's an educational learn to read program. I'm very passionate about helping kids learn to read. I have a master's in education and a master's in writing for kids. So those worlds kind of combined perfectly for this. And yeah, that's me.
What kind of writing?
I write for kids. I have 2 Christmas picture books out and then all these learn to read books. I'm
Oh
also
my
working on some novels
Oh, how
someday.
exciting. Oh my gosh, that's great. We can talk about that later, but I love that. That's so cool. And I will certainly find the links for those. We want to make sure that people can find your books, which is great. But we're here to talk more about reading and literacy and your approach to that. So tell us a little bit about the ABC See Hear Do program.
Yeah, so what's unique about my program is that it uses visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning styles. So most learn to read programs, you're learning phonics, you're just using basically visual and auditory methods. What my program does is it combines movement into that. So each letter has an animal and an action that goes with it. So for instance, the letter A is an ant, and you say, throw your hands up in the air like you're scared and say, ah! And so the kids are throwing their hands in the air and they're moving. And then like C is like curl your hands like a cat and scratch. And so they say, and they're moving their hand. And so each letter has an action with it. And adding in that kinesthetic movement really increases learning by 90% is what research shows, which is like,
90%.
yeah,
Wow.
it's huge.
That is
Um,
huge.
so it helps them learn it and it helps them retain it. So it just makes the learning to read process, A, more fun, and B, just so much easier.
Oh my gosh.
Um, because what it
Yes.
does is it just accesses a different part of the brain. And so when you're learning to read is extremely complex. And so the more areas of the brain you can access to do that, the easier it makes it. And so adding in that movement just accesses different parts of the brain. And for different kids, it just really changes things. It's really a game changer.
Oh my gosh, yeah, for sure. I know I recently did an interview with a mom who found out her son was dyslexic, and she was talking about sort of some of those brain processes of how our brain thinks about it. And then when you have a learning challenge like that, that it's just not working. I would think that this kind of approach, having that multiple layer, really could help get in front of maybe some of those issues.
Yeah, it has, I mean, it works great for, I guess, what you would call normally brained kids, but it's proved really effective for neurodivergent learners, kids that can't sit still, kids with autism, ADHD, dyslexia. I mean, it's not a dyslexic program like Orton Gilliam or anything, but
That's her
it has
program. That was her
proved
program. Yeah.
very, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, it has proved very successful for those kids, especially for the early stages of learning.
So what age would that be?
I mean, I have a board book version, so I say start with babies. The board book version only focuses on letter sounds because most alphabet books, you're learning letter names. You know, A is for apple, B is for bear, which is great, but knowing letter names doesn't actually help kids learn to read.
Mm.
And so
Right,
if
because
you're
they have no
starting,
reference. That doesn't matter. Like
right,
they don't care what the
right,
name is. Yeah.
right. And so if you start with the babies and toddlers, teaching them A says ah and B says buh, then they're already learning those pre-reading skills and they're already way ahead of the game.
Wow.
And so, we have the board book and then our first book, I put ages like 2 to 5 on it. I don't like putting ages on it because every kid is so different. But 2-year-olds are fully capable of learning letter sounds and doing the actions. Like they love it. They think it's silly and fun. Um, and those are a lot of the pre-reading skills that kids need. And if they're not learning those things until they're in school, I mean, they're already kind of behind, you know? And so learning those things early really makes a big difference.
So if they are preschool, this is going to really fall on the parents
Right.
to get this implemented.
Right. And I actually created this whole program for parents because I have 5 kids. And I've always been interested in education and learning, and I wanted to teach them all to read. I've homeschooled some. They've gone to public school. So we've done all the schoolings.
Me too. Yep.
Um, and so I taught my first 4 kids to read. Um, my daughter, the oldest, was a big challenge. I did all the things wrong. And then my next 3 boys they were just easier kids, so it wasn't as hard. And then I had my 5th child, and I was like, nope, this is never going to work. Because I was using Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, which is a great book. I mean, it worked. It worked. It didn't work well for my daughter. That's why it was a challenge.
Hmm.
Like I'm not here to bash any books because those things obviously they do work.
Sure. And different kids are
Um,
different kids, right?
right,
Yep.
right. But for my youngest son, I was like, there's no way. He
Mm.
won't listen to me. He won't sit still. If he's not,
That sounds like my youngest.
yeah, I
Yep.
mean, I was just like, there's no way. And I really wanted to find a different way to teach him to read. And I was actually working on my master's of education at the time. And so I thought, you know what? I had to do a research project and I was like, this is what I'm going to research. And I had seen a preschool teacher use movement to teach reading with one of my other kids and it worked so well and I was like, that's genius. But that method was designed specifically for a preschool classroom and it wasn't really like parent friendly.
Mm.
And I could not find anything that used movement that was parent friendly. Um, and I was really frustrated. And this was
Mhm.
also when I was, starting to write books for kids. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write my own book.
There you go. Make it
And
so.
yeah. And so I did, and I tried it out with my son. He had just turned 4, and it clicked so fast for him. And I was like, this was magic. And I
Huh.
knew I had to share it with other moms because I was like, teaching him to read was so much easier than my other kids, and he was a much harder kid, you know? And
Mm.
so that just kind of started my journey. That was in 2017. So now, 7 years later, we have 7 levels to the program and early readers and flashcards, and it's just grown a lot. So,
Oh my gosh.
um,
Is it
yeah, so
mostly
that's,
implemented for homeschools or do you have curriculum in schools as well?
I specifically designed it for parents,
Okay.
because I wanted something that a parent could just pick up, use immediately. You can do it for 1 minute a day. I mean, it's that easy. Like
Wow.
you don't have to do any prep. Um, you can follow your child's pace, do what they want to do. So it's just really easy for parents.
Mm.
That being said, I have had a lot of preschool teachers that have started to use it. And surprisingly, a lot of speech language pathologists also like it. So it's
Hmm.
been pretty versatile.
Interesting.
I would love to get it into more schools because I think it's really beneficial to kids.
Hmm.
Um, I just haven't gotten
Mhm.
quite there yet, but I'm
Yeah.
working on it.
Oh my gosh, it sounds so, as you were saying this, and I know this is not exactly what you were talking about, but like my oldest son, when he was in fourth grade, he's in his early 20s now, but this was a little while ago. His teacher actually figured out that he needed a standing desk, and he never was diagnosed with any kind of challenge, but he just learned better standing, and he was a kinetic learner. He needed to get that into his body, and I thought that was really innovative back then to have her think that it was like she knows he can't sit still, and that's okay. And he got to sort of wiggle around, but standing up, and he was still a great student. He was able to do the work and everything, but just that small change, getting it into his body. And so I love this idea of like when you were saying that movement and the action and associating that. And I know, like I used to homeschool, and we used the classical conversations curriculum that has a lot of singing and like putting things into your brain through songs, and just getting that different approach, I think, is so amazing.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for adding movement to anything. Like even if it's not learning to read, even if you're not using my program, like that is my biggest tip to parents, to incorporate movement whenever you can. Like if your kid is struggling with spelling words, have them be jumping on the trampoline or bouncing on a yoga ball or walking on a treadmill, anything where they can be moving their body. It just opens up different parts of the brain. It helps them focus. Um, it's just pretty incredible, and I wish more teachers like knew this and incorporated this in the classroom.
Yeah, because you never know. Like all of us have different styles. I know I am a visual learner. I don't process through my ears very well. I mean, I hear it just perfectly fine, but I don't. I know
Right.
that I can't listen to things. I have to see things, and every
Mhm.
person is different, right? And kids are different, and those three different pillars are really important to understand which one works. And if you don't know, you use all three, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And so is there kind of an upper limit to this for a kid? I can't remember now with the dyslexia person I spoke to, but I feel like she said it was like 7 or 10 or something. Like if you don't have it in your brain by then, it's kind of a lost cause.
Yeah, my program through level 7, we put up to age 8 on it. I have had older kids that are special needs use it. I mean, I think it's super beneficial to older kids, but like the illustrations are definitely for younger kids. So I think sometimes if they're older, they're like, that's too babyish.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I've definitely had like some 11-year-olds with autism use the program really effectively. Things like that. I I actually listened to that episode on dyslexia this morning, and
Oh.
it was awesome. I had so many, yes, I was just like, yes, yes, yes.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Um, but yeah, so what I have found is that, especially in public school, kindergarten through second grade is when kids are learning to read. Once they're in third grade, they're reading to learn. And it is a huge jump. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's usually around, third grade's usually 8 or 9-year-olds. So if your child is not a really solid reader by third grade, then they're really going to struggle because everything in school is you have to be good at
Dependent on
reading.
reading.
Yeah,
Yes.
it
Yep.
really is. And if you're not, everything's frustrating. Everything's hard, and then they just start to fall behind and then they hate school and then they think they're dumb. It's just this,
Mm-hmm.
it's
I
just
have a
this
16-year-old who tells me that all the time,
yeah,
unfortunately, which is sad because now what do I do, right? He's 16.
yeah. Yeah. And so this is why I'm so passionate and like advocate so much for kids learning when they're young, and they have to have a really strong foundation. And all the research shows that phonics is the best way for kids to learn to read.
Yes.
Um,
That was one of the things that came up in that dyslexia episode, is that she found out that a lot of the schools had abandoned that. And that now these kids, they're just not learning.
yeah, it's kind of scary the percentage of kids that are not at reading level. Like it's mind-blowing actually, and
Yes,
very alarming.
very much for
And
the future of
so
our country, honestly, right?
yes, yes.
Yep.
And and I think, that's one of the myths about learning to read is that people think, oh, kids will just pick it up. But that is not true. I mean, there are some, I think I read like 1 to 7% of kids can pick it up. That's a very small percentage.
Wow, less than 10%. Wow.
Yeah. So like 92 to 99% of
Hmm.
kids, they have to be taught to read. It's not something normal and natural that our brains will just figure out.
Right.
Which, learning to speak is. And I think that's why a lot of people confuse that because you do learn language naturally, but you do not learn to read naturally.
That's why I
And
know we
so,
used to talk about like learning a second language when you're little because you don't have those words flying around in your brain, right? You think about it by sound. And so it's
mhm.
so much easier to learn a second or third language when you're small because you're not like I know I'm still trying to learn Spanish and German and I'm translating all the time, right? I'm translating into English because that's what makes sense to me, but little kids don't have to do that.
Right. And little kids, like their brains are sponges. They can pick up things so quickly. And so, I just think the earlier you can start with those early pre-reading skills, the better prepared they'll be. And even if your child's in kindergarten, first grade, and they do not have a strong foundation in phonics, like I tell people, people will be like, oh, well, my kid can sort of read, CVC words like consonant, vowel, consonant.
Mm.
So should I start with level 3 or 4? And I'm like, no, unless they can read those CVC words like in a snap, you stick with level 1 or 2 until it's mastered because they have to have a strong foundation in that. Otherwise, it's just frustrating. Their
Yeah.
reading is slow. They don't understand. They have to spend so much time thinking about how to read the word that by the time they read it, they don't even know what they're reading.
Yes.
Uh, so
Yep.
I really recommend going slowly and building a really strong foundation before you try to get really complicated.
All right. So go slow and start as early as you can and make sure you're using all the three different things. So
However,
you
I will say, when I say start as early as you can, I'm definitely not saying like make your child sit down and be like, we're going to learn these things. Like, absolutely not.
right,
It
right,
should
right.
all be play based, all fun. And
Yes.
that's the whole goal of my books and my company is making learning to read fun. Like it should be silly. You should be laughing. You should be
Mhm.
playing games, doing sensory activities. Never is it like you're going to sit here for 20 minutes and practice these flashcards.
No,
Like
especially if
that's
they're 2 years old, right?
right. Right, right, right.
Yeah. Right. I love that you have a board book. I mean, that's like a nighttime thing or quiet time or whatever. Those are such good introductory things. And then they get used to that. And then you can introduce them further into the programs as they get older, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like
Mhm.
preschools, I think nowadays do a really good job of teaching kids letters, but it's still, again, it's almost always letter names. And
Not sounds.
where we really need to shift that focus is to letter sounds.
Right, right. Yeah. And especially if they're not teaching phonics anymore, then you're just like it's all sight, it's all by
Hmm.
sight instead of by sound and learning how to put it all together. Yeah, that's fantastic. I just this program sounds so good. So you said you have 7 levels.
Yeah, there's 7 levels. So I broke uppercase and lowercase into 2 separate levels, level 1 and 2, because people are very opinionated about if you should start with upper or lowercase. I don't know. It's a thing.
They
I
sound the same if they're upper or lower.
I mean, to me, uppercase is easier for younger kids to recognize and to write because they're just blockier. Lowercase is hard. A lot of, B and D look very similar, so kids mix them up. So lowercase is a little more challenging, but a lot of people argue you should just start with lowercase because that's naturally what you read. Um, so I usually recommend if your child's 2 to 4, start with uppercase. If they're 5 or older, start with lowercase. But really, you can do whatever you want. Um, and then it goes into blended beginning sounds, where you're learning that like CH makes the ch sound. And then level 4 is blended ending sounds, where you're learning like ing and like those types of patterns. Then level 5 is long vowels, which is, I think, the trickiest book.
Mm.
Long vowels are, and the way I set that up is each long vowel has one animal in action, and then each page of the book is dedicated to the different letter combinations that make that long vowel sound. So like the long E, you have EE and EA and Y and, all those different things. Then we
Mhm.
have sight words, and then level 7 is irregular sounds, which, okay, that's also tricky because English is just weird.
Yeah. Is that like the schwa sound?
Yeah.
Remember that?
The
Mm.
schwa and the other, like, how C can make an S sound,
Mm.
um, how D, G, E can make the J sound,
All the
all
French
those
words.
all those weird things that happen.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. When
So,
you said that ch sound, it reminded me of my older kids had this letter factory. I think it was a video with a little frog or something, and he did a
yeah,
lot.
Leapfrog. We
Yes,
love the
leapfrog.
video. Hmm.
Yes, yes, those were so good. And they would
Hmm.
actually like reference that. They remembered that. It was in their brain. And I thought that was so good because it was all sound based. And they could see those letters, but as going along the factory, whatever thing. But
Yeah, I'm a big fan of those Leapfrog videos. Those were great.
yeah, that's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Well, this is so good. What else do parents need to know that maybe I didn't ask you yet?
Um, One other thing I'll say is that we do have early readers, where, okay, so one of my biggest pet peeves about kids' books is that early readers are almost always way too hard.
Oh,
Especially if it's like a character or, if it's a Pokemon book or a Superman book, kids cannot read half of the words in those books. And sure, they like looking through them, they like the pictures, whatever. Um, but it doesn't really help reading skills and it doesn't help reading confidence. So a lot of times kids, a parent, they don't know. So they say, oh, it says level 1 or early reader. And so they hand the book to their kid, and then their kid's like, I can't actually read this. It's full of sight words.
oh.
It's full of things they can't sound out.
Then they're
And then
discouraged and they don't like
they're
it.
frustrated and they're like, oh, I must be stupid because I can't read this, or.
Hmm.
Um, So I've created early readers where, like, if they finish the level 1 book, then you can give them an early reader where they can read every single word in the book. There's nothing that they have not already learned from that main book. And so it just builds a lot of confidence. Um, so that's one thing, like just recognize as parents, if you're checking early readers out from the library, just make sure you're finding ones that actually fit your child's reading level. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously there can be 1 or 2 or 3 words they don't know,
Sure.
right? But if you open to a page and they can't read 5, 6, 7 of the words on the page, it's too hard for them.
Okay.
So
Okay. That's good. When do you have sort of clues that you look for in a child's reading abilities where you would start to say maybe this kid needs a little bit of extra help in some way? Are there clues that you would see of early signs of challenges like dyslexia or something?
um, So there are a number of reading disabilities. Dyslexia, there's um, I'm blanking on the name of it. Ones with comprehension, where they can decode, but they're not actually understanding what they're reading. Um, it's kind of tricky because I think the common go-to advice is wait, and like it's hard to really know those things till your kid is like 7 or 8. But then
Okay.
again, by that age, often it feels a little too late. So, um, but I mean, it's hard to say because every kid develops so differently.
Right.
Um, but I think parents do know their kids. And I think if a parent has a gut feeling like something doesn't seem quite right,
Hmm.
should listen to that.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's amazing how often that is right when you just have that little feeling of like, maybe something needs to be checked out here.
And I mean, maybe it is that they just weren't ready and things will click in a few months.
Hmm.
If their child is 2 and not remembering the letter sounds, like I wouldn't worry yet. So I think it also depends on how old the child is and,
Sure.
things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, before I let you go, I know we'll make sure we have lots of links in the show notes, but tell us a little bit about your other books as well.
Oh, my Christmas books?
Yeah.
So those are, one is called The Remember Tree and one is called Where is the Star? The Remember Tree is about the symbols of Christmas and it has some riddles in it the kids love. Um, and Where is the Star is about a little boy who's in a nativity and he's the star, but he's scared. So he's hiding.
Oh, that sounds so sweet. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. We'll have to check those
Oh,
out too. It's
well, thank
lovely.
you.
Is that how you started? Did you say you started writing first and then you developed your curriculum?
I actually started in my Master's of Education first, and during that program, I realized I wanted to be a writer.
Okay.
Um, and so I started writing books during that program. And then later, I went and got my master's in writing for children and young adults.
Oh my gosh, you've got a master's in writing. Okay, when you said that
Yeah.
writing, I didn't put it together as that was part of your master's as well. So goodness, wow, that is fantastic. Well, this has been such a pleasure. Again, we'll make sure we have all the links, but just for people listening, can you just tell us how do we find you?
Yeah. My website is stephaniehohl.com, or we have a website for ABC and then C as in SEE, heredo.com. We're on all the social medias at ABC See Here Do or at Stephanie Hohl. So
Okay.
on our ABC website, we post tons of ideas for letter learning games, sensory activities. We have freebies on there. So even if you don't buy the books, check out the website because we've got tons of letter learning ideas to make it fun.
Oh, perfect. Gosh, that's amazing. I hope everybody checks it out. This has been such a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much. Very like just packed with ideas and tips and everything. So really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Have a great day. This has been the Teaching Your Toddler podcast with Mary Jo Tinley. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll find us on our website at teachingyourtoddler.com, as well as on Facebook at Teaching Your Toddler, on Instagram, and on Twitter at Teaching Toddler. So join us again, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.